When you get a package or a nucleus, do you start to feed the bees straight away?
Yes, you definitely can do that. As I said, it can't hurt to feed your bees. And what you want to feed them is plain white sugar. You don't want to feed them raw sugar or brown sugar. Plain white sugar is the best feed for them, mixed with water. So you want to mix that sugar. We would go litres and kilograms, 1 litre of water to 1 kilogram of sugar, and just mix them in a saucepan. Just a gentle heat makes the sugar dissolve a lot easier. And check out the Flow YouTube channel or Instagram page for, I think they're on Instagram, for Cedar's videos on making feeders. Basically your bee feeder will go up on top of your inner cover. You pull the plug out, the bees have jammed it in nice and tight, and then put your feeder on top and the bees will just get that sugar syrup. And yeah, if you definitely need to feed your bees if you get a package. If you get a nuke, it may not be so urgent because the nuke probably comes with enough honey stores that they're going to be okay. You really need to start paying attention to what is blooming in your area and also what the bees in your local area already are foraging on. So when you walk out into your garden and into, you walk around in the trees, you look up or you look down and you try and see what the bees are actually foraging on and see if there's plenty of food for them. But yeah, as I said, definitely can't hurt to feed your bees. I'm just going to pull another frame out here. This colony is looking really nice and healthy. What we're looking for is the population, first of all, which is looking good. We're looking for brood in here. I'm just going to touch them to move them so we can see underneath them. Just a really light touch on their backs, they'll move. We're looking for this capped brood here. So this is bees pupating under these cappings. The life cycle of a bee is the egg from a queen. That hatches on day 3 and turns into a very tiny little grub. And the nurse bees then feed that grub royal jelly for a couple of days. The grub swims around in a pool of royal jelly right at the bottom of the cell. And then it grows and grows and grows. There's a bigger one just there. And then on day 7 or 7.5, the bees will cap the cell like this, and that grub then spins a cocoon around itself and pupates into an adult bee and is then in that cell for another 2 weeks. And here I can see a fluffy bee that looks like it's just emerged. They're really fluffy when they first chew their way out of this capping. So that whole cycle from egg to chewing its way out of that cell is 21 days, so 3 weeks exactly. And if you know those numbers, you can work out a lot of things that are going on, lots of different scenarios in your beehive. Because I often say beekeeping is a lot about guessing the past, guessing what's happened. You go into your hive and something's different and you think, oh, what have they done? It's another puzzle to figure out. So you may have to apply some of those numbers. I'm just trying to get those bees off. Another thing to do actually too is, if you find your colony has drawn half frames of wax like this one has, so they're all sort of half drawn and it's slowed down. If you want to get those drawn faster, you can feed them and flip them around to the opposite orientation. Now this is totally unnecessary because the bees will just draw their comb as they want to, but if you, the beekeeper, want to get comb drawn, whoop, there's a sting. The bee's stinging me. This is interesting what happens here. It'll try and get its stinger out, so it'll probably pull its abdomen out. If you're quick, you can actually, if you've got your hive tool or your fingernail, you can scrape that out while the bee is trying to pull it out, and you can actually save that bee. I thought it was interesting to show it. So I should say here that if you're new to beekeeping, please wear your protective equipment, wear your gloves. I don't mind getting stung very much, it happens a lot, and I don't swell up or anything, so I'm very used to getting stung. But it can be quite stressful to get stung when you're a newbie. Having said that though, it's almost impossible to keep bees without getting stung once or twice. You can see these bees here peering up out of the hive. And some people say these are the guard bees, ready to defend the hive if they need to. They're ready to fly out. So usually if you see a lot of those bees, you can just blow some smoke across them and they'll just go down.
Pete, what's the best kind of weather to be keeping bees in?
You can keep bees in all climates, but a really great day to inspect bees is a day like today. It's quite warm, the sun's out, there's no wind. It's almost the perfect day, apart from the fact that it's too warm to wear a bee suit for the beekeeper. If the weather is windy or it's rainy or overcast, the bees can get a bit feisty. They don't really generally like it that much. As you can see, this colony is really nice. I can see some trophallaxis here with bees feeding each other nectar. And that's what they do to dry nectar out and also spread pheromones around the hive. They all feed each other, and the worker bees feed the queen. So if it's a really nice warm sunny day like today, it's a really great time to do your inspection. You don't want to do it too early or too late. If you do it at sort of close to dawn, you may find there's a lot of forager bees all still at home and at a loose end, and they're the ones that will be feisty. Whereas today all the foragers are out and about and they're not at home twiddling their thumbs. I'm just looking at this frame. I'm going to see some eggs in here again. So I'm just going through this colony, basically looking for anything weird about the brood. Anything weird in the cappings. I want to see lots of eggs and young larvae down here. And I want to see some pollen, which is this orange stuff here. And I want to see some honey stores as well. I haven't seen much yet. It's fairly dry. Once again, that may mean that we might need to consider feeding these bees. As I said, that the flow has slowed down here considerably. And the reason I know that is because we can monitor our flow supers by looking in the windows. So this hive doesn't have a super yet because it's too weak. But if you monitor your flow super and watch it filling with nectar, you can also watch the bees consume that nectar. And when they're consuming the nectar or consuming the honey, you know the flow is probably shut down.
Pete, Dean's asking, a healthy environment creates a healthy bee population. What can we do to improve our surrounding environment if we're wanting to be beekeepers?
That's a great question. My mind goes straight to pesticide use. So you could always talk to your neighbours about discontinuing to use pesticides. That can be a tricky conversation, but a jar of honey can really help that. I do find people really care about bees when you make them aware of what's going on, and they genuinely would like to help. And I've had lots of conversations like that with my neighbours about not using pesticides, and they all came on board. It was really great. Another thing to do is plant flowers. Obviously, it's just a really beautiful thing to do anyway, is to have a lovely flower garden around your bees. As I said in the beginning, a single garden of flowers is not enough to sustain a single bee colony because they forage quite a wide area. But it's really lovely to have your own garden and you've got flowers in between your veggies and your bees come and forage. A really great thing, a really great couple of plants to start with is anything purple. Bees seem to be attracted to the purple flowers. So things like basil or tulsi, lavender, rosemary. I've got a lot of thyme in this garden. It's not purple obviously, but it's lovely little white flowers. The bees love that. Tracy, you know some other flowers you've planted here, don't you?
I do actually, Pete. Something I prepared a little earlier because of course I plant all these flowers and then I can never remember what I've planted. But I do remember that I've planted lots of those gaura, which are those long sort of flowing ones. This one's got a lot of straw flowers in it. There's the scavola, the rosellas, what else? Lots of lavender. The gaura is a good, the Asilium, which is sort of the little white one there that's really nice in salads. All the violas and the pansies that I think Callum's showing you now. I think those big red ones, I think they're stock or something like that. And of course the Angelina, I always call them the Angelina jolly flowers. Because the bees love them and the native bees love them, and so yeah, they're a bit of my fave with the Angelinas. But then just all the veggies, of course, with the flowers that are flowering at the moment. So heaps for the bees at the moment. It's looking pretty healthy.
What are the veggies? We've got capsicums in here, have we?
Yeah, capsicums and chilies, and there's fennel.
Oh, I can see the fennel in
which
there.
you can sort of see the fennel. Lots of rocket and parsley and warrigal greens, which is a native spinach, which is just so delicious and grows incredibly fast. Lots of basil and silver beet. So yeah, we're getting lots of good food at the moment. The cucumbers, the zucchinis, the eggplants, all the yummy things. So just got to think of how to cook them at lunchtime.
Trace is an amazing gardener and an amazing cook, and so we get a lot of produce from our beautiful garden and
Thanks,
from our
Kate.
beehives. We still haven't seen the Queen. We may have missed her. I haven't really been looking out for her, but... And just a note on how I'm holding the frame. So I've just been holding in the middle. Sometimes usually fairly sturdy. This one's even pretty sturdy, but when the comb's new, it can really bend and fall out. And once you've dropped a comb, you really don't want to do it again. It's a good reminder. But if you do actually ever drop a comb out of a frame, then it's easy just to rubber band it around. We've done a couple of live feeds where we've done that. We're fixing up cross-combed colonies and you just put rubber bands around the comb and the bees will fix it all in.
With the hive that you're looking at, and often so many of them that we open up, sometimes they're really white and this one's really yellow. Is that to do with the plants? Or?
Apparently all wax starts off quite white and the bees then have something. This is actually something I've heard a long time ago, so I may be just kind of making this up a little bit, but it's a good thing to check out. The bees have something that turns the wax yellow, and then after a lot of foot traffic and a lot of brood has gone through the comb, it turns kind of brown and then black. You can actually see here where a patch of brood has gone through already. So there's yellow down the bottom, and then in here is the brown coloured comb where the brood cycle's gone through, and that just gets browner and browner and then turns to black. And then when it's black, you may want to cycle out your comb because it really, the wax does take on everything that the colony brings in. Here's a bee emerging from the cell. So this must be day 21 for this bee. It's chewed its way through the capping and it's poking its head out. And sometimes this can be very quick and other times it can take a really long time. And there's some bees, 3 bees feeding each other right on top of the bee that's trying to emerge. The bees don't really seem to care about the brood emerging. They just walk all over it. Get it out of the way. There we go.
Can you point out the difference between the drone brood and just the worker bee brood?
I could, but there's no drone brood in this colony.
Oh.
So
How come?
what Chase is talking about is the cell sizes that the bees will draw. So in a colony where the beekeeper has used foundation, which is either wax or plastic, a sheet that slots into the frame. Often it's got wires to support it. The size of that foundation is hexagons that are sized for the queen to lay worker eggs into. When you let the bees draw whatever they want, often they'll draw a lot of drone-sized cells around the worker-sized cells. They may, like, when they're wanting drones, they'll just draw a big patch of drone comb, and it's quite large. And the size of the comb, here's that little bee just popped out there. It's very fluffy and cute. And there's another one that's just emerged too. See, it's a little bit uncoordinated and it's kind of wandering around. So the drone-sized cells, the queen sticks her head down the cell and kind of measures it with her forelegs apparently, and measures what size it is and lays a worker egg or a drone egg accordingly. And the reason that these bees haven't drawn drones is that they're fairly low on reserves of food stores. And they can't actually afford to draw drone comb right now and make drones. Making drones seems to be a luxury for bee colonies and seems to happen a lot more when resources are booming. So in the springtime, they'll be way more likely to draw comb that's drone sized. Whereas this is a swarm that got going, and then they kind of have got a little bit stuck in this phase because the flow has sort of stopped a little bit. We haven't seen the queen here. We might go back through and see if we can find her while we answer a few more questions.
No. Pete, see the way they're building their comb on the frames, and they all seem to be starting maybe at the back. Is that usual, rather than just fill one then move on to the next one, or is it because of what you were just saying about the flow at the moment?
It is usual. Although every colony is sort of different. Some colonies will draw here, here and here and then join them up. Other colonies will draw here, here and here and join them up. Other colonies will just draw here and then here and join it up. They'll draw across the box all the way across, or they'll draw this little corner out and live there. It's not uncommon to see a small colony in a box living right there in the corner somewhere, or over here in some corner. And I've got no idea why they do that or what they're doing. They cluster up for warmth, so the smaller colony wants to cluster and keep their brood at the right temperature, which is 35 degrees Celsius. So if the brood temperature gets a little colder or a little hotter, that brood apparently turns into bees that don't quite live as long and are less able to function. So the temperature of the brood nest is really important, so that's probably a reason why they cluster together. If the population is good enough that they can draw comb all the way across the box, then they will. However, these bees obviously have drawn across the box like this and just gathered in here, and that's why I suggest, if you want to draw the comb on the other end of the frame, you can just turn it around so it's opposite to the other one. However, this does interrupt the brood cluster, keeping the brood warm or cool at the right temperature. So you just do need to be careful of doing that. You want to make sure that there's enough supplies for those guys to handle a change like that. So we're going to go through and find the queen. May not have any success. There's a couple of bees festooning down here, just holding on. So the way I like to find the queen is just to get the bees moving. That's just how I do it, there's lots of different ways that beekeepers do it. And I look for the difference in movement across the whole frame. Sometimes you can look for the difference in the abdomen, which is the long back part of the bee. The queen has a long, pointy abdomen as opposed to the worker bees. And as opposed to the drones have a large abdomen, but it's kind of rounded. I'll just put that one again down here.
Pete, Greg's asking, just because you were talking about the drones before, Greg's got 2 hives in the same area and they're both similar sized hives. One hive has almost no drones and the other has a lot of drones and drone brood. Just wondering why you reckon that might be.
Yeah, I don't really know the answer to that. It can be the way that the colony has drawn their wax. Often if they've drawn drone comb in the first place, the queen will lay more drones because the comb exists, and they've drawn that comb because they wanted to make drones at that time. If the colonies are exactly the same age, then that's a really hard one to answer, because it must just come down to, colony genetics and propensity to want to make drones. But if the colony with lots of drones is a little bit older or started at a different season in the year, then that may answer the question, because the bees, while they were drawing that comb, may have had lots of resources available to want to make drones. And they may have drawn that drone comb and then the queen just lays in it. So having said that, what can happen when the flow slows down or shuts off, usually during the colder months, is that the bees will kick the drones out, and this takes a few weeks. So they battle the drones at the door, and the drones really want to get in and go home, but the workers won't actually let them in because they're too much of a draw on the colony's resources. So everything slows down for the colder months, or for when there's what's called a dearth, which is a lack of nectar around. And so the workers will actually preserve the colony by kicking the drones out. I'm just going to look down on the side here for the queen. Sometimes she's on the side of the box. So I don't really know the answer as to why 2 colonies that are the same size, one will have lots of drones, the other won't. It's just kind of bees. There's a lot to be said for having more than one colony in your bee yard, because you can do those sort of comparisons and you can see the difference between different hives and what they do, and get a broader understanding of bees, and also why they do certain things and why they don't. Or see, I can show you a comb bending there, so that's what you don't want to do. Let's bend it back in. We're still looking for this queen.
Pete, Bevans and Mackay, which is here in Australia up north, just wondering when should they stop taking honey to ensure that there's enough honey to get them through the wet season?
Yeah, good question. So I guess I kind of need a little more information to answer that accurately, but I would probably stop now, because I'm guessing the wet season is just about to start. So usually when I harvest, I'll take, if I've got a very full super, I'll take 4 out of the 6 frames and leave 2 frames full of honey. If you've got honey in your brood nest already, if you've got like 2 frames of honey in your brood nest, you can maybe leave 1 flow frame. Just depends on your colony size and how long you expect the dearth to be as to how much honey to leave your colony. I mean, leaving them 3 or 4 frames in the super is going to be plenty for them. And It's definitely a question you might want to ask your local beekeeper, your local experienced beekeeper, because they'll be much more aware of your conditions than I can be. And beekeeping is so local, you know, down the road. I looked at some hives the other day that are 15 minutes, which is half an hour away, in a completely different set of...
Yeah, Pauline's got an interesting question. It's funny because I found a brood box in October. Couldn't spot the queen, but there was lots of new brood and the 2 frames were full. It all kind of happened. Hives. On the weekend I thought I had no honey and I pulled a frame in my hive was capped and I got a whole lot of honey out of it.
Yeah, that's a great tip, Trace, is the window end of your super. What we've got here is what the bees can do. Obviously this is brood we're looking at and wax that they've drawn, but if you pretend this is a flow frame, they've actually filled this flow frame to here and nothing in the window. And you look in and you think, oh, there's no honey. But when you pull the frame out, oh, there's actually heaps of honey. So the bees don't like the light, and the gap in the little window cover, between the window cover and the fixed panel of the super, lets a little bit of light in, just a tiny amount. And sometimes the bees won't draw all the way, won't fill honey all the way out to the end. So it is a really great idea just to have a look at your super every now and again and check to see if you've got honey or not. The other thing that can happen, as you mentioned, was the bees can actually eat the honey. So you can have an almost full frame and then the bees will come up from the brood nest like this and eat a little half moon out of the bottom of the middle of the frames. So sometimes the side frames can be completely full and the middle frames can look full, but they've actually got a big chunk eaten out of them. And that's completely normal behavior. So it's always good to have a little look. Looking in the windows is really, really great, and it's a really great feature of the flow hive, but sometimes you do need to just crack open your super and pull out a couple of frames. And it's usually enough to just pull out 2 or 3, and you can look down the sides of the other ones. Once you've pulled one out, you can just sort of do this and pry them apart and go, oh yeah, there's honey down there. You can usually see down the sides. And you always want to be a little careful to make sure you don't take all the honey. You want to leave some for the bees. I'm still looking for the queen. She's very elusive today.
She's hiding from you, Pete.
I'm pretty distracted also.
Hey, this is a good one because this is a question we get asked quite a lot through customer support. Tyson's asking, can a 7 flow frame fit on the top of an 8 frame Langstroth box?
The short answer is no, because an 8 frame Langstroth box here is the smaller box and the 7 frame flow super is the larger box, so you'll get about that much overhang if you put it on. But it's sort of a bit cumbersome, I'd say, and I wouldn't recommend onto an 8 frame Langstroth brood box, or you want to put a 7 frame super onto a 10 frame Langstroth brood box.
Thanks, Pete. Yeah, it's a common one, I think, because we have like the 7 and the 6, and then it's the 8 and the 10.
It is pretty confusing.
Yeah, but always ring up and check if you're worried, because you don't want to buy the wrong size box and then have to ship it back, and that'll give you tears and heartache.
A good rule of thumb is that the lower numbers go together and the higher numbers go together.
Oh, Pete, you should be in customer support.
If you don't want to count, like me, you know.
Hey, got a question. Can shade be a big impact on bees? Recently, a few of Brandon's hives have absconded for no clear reason other than they had more shade than the other hives. And Jebediah, they're in Southern California with a Mediterranean climate. So.
Yeah, shade can definitely be a factor, and full sun is better than mostly shade. I would recommend that their hives out in the middle of a paddock on pallets and in the full sun, and just leave them there over the summer, and the bees just figure it out. They seem to... You'll have your empty combs. You really want to try and look for signs of disease like American foul brood or European foul brood. anything that the bees haven't been able to deal with. You may have a small hive beetle slime out, which the bees really can't deal with. They tend to abscond when that happens. And that happens when the bees get really weak. So something like American foulbrood, for example, can make a hive weak. And then something like small hive beetle can get a foothold on one of the side combs, and then they'll start the maggots will start kind of encroaching on the hive space. The brood will be dying from AFB, and the colony will just get very weak, and then eventually the small amount of bees that are left will say, hey, we can't deal with this, we're getting out. And it's like their little last ditch effort of finding a new place to live. So you may want to just inspect your colonies and see what's happened there, see if you can check it out and guess what's gone on.
Hey, I think we're having a few tech problems again, Pete, so...
No worries, I'm going to put the lid on this hive.
Yeah, might want to wind you up and people will have to watch the recording. Sorry about that, folks, there was a few problems today.
All right, well...
Pete will close up the hive for you.
Yeah, we're closing up this hive. Thanks a lot, folks, for all your questions. And I'm going to get out of my bee jacket